Welcome back. Welcome back to another episode. I am Dr. Maisha, your host of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. If you're listening live, hello, and thank you. And for those of you who are listening on replay, remember to subscribe and share this episode with a friend, a family member, a colleague. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about communication. And you all know that this is my bread and butter. This is the thing that I love. I love teaching about the intricacies and the nuances of communication that empower people, because my biggest commitment is that to leave people feeling seen, heard, respected, and valued, and to teach others how to communicate in ways that do the same. And so you all know this about me. You listen to me every week. You know that I'm a big person who loves communication. And also, I do it through an equity lens and I do it through a trauma informed lens. So I'm really concerned about creating spaces that of trust and safety. Now, what you may not know about me is that I love to dance, particularly for most of my adult life. I have been a salsa dancer, and I love salsa dancing. Actually love many forms of Latin dance, bachata and merengue and little cha-cha. So I love, but my favorite is salsa. My favorite is salsa dancing. And what I love most about salsa is the partnership. And I remember when I was first learning how to dance, and I've always been sort of this a leader at heart, right? So I lead in a lot of things. But when I was learning to salsa dance, you have to follow your partner. You have to become in sync with your partner. And especially in salsa, particularly, there's a lead and there's a follower. Now, um, when I dance, particularly with men, then I allow them to lead. But women dance together. They choose who's leading and who's following. You can learn both parts, right? Um, so as I learned to dance, I had to learn to follow. In order to learn to follow, I had to learn to listen. Not listen with my ears, but listen with my body, to become very responsive to the my partner's communication, physical communication or kinesthetic communication of when he wanted me to turn, or when he wanted me to step back, or when he wanted to pull me close, right? So learning to listen kinesthetically with my body helped me to become a better follower. And I could dance with multiple different partners and instantly be in a dance because I'm listening to, not just with my ears, but listening with my eyes, looking for kinesthetic clues, visual clues of what my partner was about to guide me to do next. And so as I thought about that in the context of communication, communication really is a dance. And I listen to a lot of different books on communication, mostly because I'm always interested to see how are other um, people who are considered to be experts in communication. How are they teaching people? How are they speaking about how to communicate? And one thing I've noticed, and this is not to invalidate anyone else, but it's just a noticing, is that sometimes when I hear these people who are master communicators, as they would call themselves, they approach communication in a very rigid and algorithmic way, right? So when you're active listening, make sure that you are verbalizing that you're paying attention, or make sure that you're leaning in, or make sure that you have a specific body posture. Or when you are communicating nonverbally, make sure you do this, make sure you do that. And I think that there is some value in understanding how to be aware of your body language and how to be aware of your nonverbal communication. It's very important because we know that communication is only 7% verbal and 93% everything else. So it is important for you to be mindful of your facial expressions, to be aware of your body language, and to understand that when people are expressing themselves, they are expressing themselves through facial expression and through body language. However, to relegate communication into this, to relegate, to diminish communication to a this algorithmic thing, it really doesn't do it justice, right? It takes away the connection aspect of communication, and that essentially is what we're doing when we're communicating. We are connecting. It's the same thing as what we're doing when we're dancing. We are connecting, right? And so it's important to understand that there are things that can be algorithmic about communication, but the most effective communicators actually dance inside of the interaction. So, here I wanted to share a few things that can help you to be more flexible, to um, enhance that capacity to listen and dance inside of the interaction of communication. So I've already talked about one of them, and that is the listening. And I talk about listening all of the time. But when I'm speaking about listening, I'm talking about not just listening with your ears in active listening. Most of the time when people talk about active listening, they're talking about listening with your ears and indicating with body language that you are listening. But when I speak about listening, I'm talking about listening with your ears, listening with your eyes, and listening with your whole body, right? So you can see, you can hear the communication, you can see the body language that goes with the communication and that goes with the listening. If you're speaking and they're listening to you, you can see their body language, you can see their eye contact, their facial expressions, which is communicating back to you as to, are they understanding? Is there something that's rubbing them a particular way? Are they leaning in with interest? So you can use your eyes to listen to their listening, if that makes sense. And you can use your body to sort of detect shifts and changes in energy. And I know energy, when people talk about energy, a lot of times they're like, this is woo, but there is a documented experience. You know, when you walk into the room and you get a feeling on the inside, right? That is, we call that energy, but it's a kinesthetic sensation. So we listen kinesthetically, we listen with our ears, and we listen with our eyes. And when we start to expand our capacity to listen to our bodies, listen with our entire body, then it allows us to see things we wouldn't normally see and hear things that we wouldn't normally hear, so that we can respond fluently to the interaction, the communication that's going on, whether the communication is verbal or nonverbal. Okay. And we can respond nonverbally as well. All right. The second thing I think that makes communication very powerful and expands our capacity to dance is our own emotional intelligence, our own emotional fluency. Now, I talk about emotional intelligence all the time. I do it whole talks on how valuable it is in leadership in the healthcare space. But that emotional intelligence, that ability to recognize what's going on in our body, right? Recognize, become aware of, to be able to name, to be able to honor, to be able to regulate our emotions, and to be able to effectively communicate what's happening. Even if we don't know the emotion itself, it, it allows us to, gives us a bit of behavioral flexibility inside of the communication. And it gives us more expanded vocabulary when we begin to learn how to name what's going on with our bodies and name what we're experiencing, which leads me to the next thing, is that expanded vocabulary. When we expand our vocabulary, understanding what are the powerful questions that to ask? What are some powerful ways to help people to see a different perspective, or get people to be on the same page with you? That expanded vocabulary. And when I talk about vocabulary, I'm not talking about what you might have guessed by now, words. I'm not talking about Merriam-Webster dictionary. I'm talking about your vocabulary of phrasing, how you respond in a verbal way. So while words are 7% of communication, we can powerfully expand the way that we communicate, the way that we ask questions, in order to dance inside of that conversation, to keep the conversation open, to keep the conversation growing, and to be able to navigate challenging circumstances, communication circumstances, big feelings, intensity of conversation. We can expand the vocabulary. So it may sound like something like, man, I see this is really important to you. Help me to understand your point of view. It may sound something like, can you ask that question again, but ask it differently, because so that I can understand what you're saying. Or it may even sound something like, I want to make sure that what I'm saying is coming across clearly to you. Can you let me know what you just heard? Right? So just expanding your phrasing, and there's many more where that comes from, but expanding your capacity to clarify language by expanding your phrasing, your phrasing vocabulary, your capacity to reframe, your capacity to ask the right questions to elicit the kind of responses that you're looking for, and the capacity to um, effectively and um, with compassion manage challenging communications and circumstances. So, so that is another way to expand your capacity to dance inside of communication. And then the last thing is just practice. Practice, 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 practice. I think that oftentimes when we are communicating, we go into our comfort zone, and it's normal and natural to do that, right? When we are in these spaces, the brain wants to protect us from harm. Always, always seeking to protect us from harm. And so we being inside of our comfort zone feels protected. However, when we take a chance and move a little bit outside of that comfort zone to practice the new tools that we might learn, then this is how we actually are able to play and dance and expand ourselves. Um, you know, when in medicine, when someone, let's say, I used to do a lot of sports medicine, and when someone is injured, has maybe like a shoulder injury, oftentimes in the initial healing, it limits that range of motion, right? It limits that range of motion. But with practice, with therapy, with continued movement, you can expand that range of motion again. And when you expand the range of motion after an injury, or even when you're just stretching and you're expanding your range of motion in general just to maintain your health, that is when you have the most flexibility. So with communication, with these things, listening, with expanding our emotional intelligence, with learning new vocabulary to handle different circumstances, and with practice, we are essentially expanding our range of motion, expanding our communication flexibility. And that allows us to dance in interactions, which allows us to more confidently and more effectively handle whatever communication comes your way. So I wanted to just, bring that today, the importance of that communication, dancing into communication, rather than always approaching it in an algorithmic way. There's nothing wrong with the algorithm, and it gives you more flexibility if you can empower yourself with those four things. All right, this is one of the things that I do. This is one of the things that I teach. I even built a course around it called Communication That Transforms. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to the website, mindremappingacademy.com. You can download an overview. You'll be able to even do a sample. But I encourage you to begin to think about how do you expand your communication flexibility. If you're in an organization, this leads to more effective collaboration and less conflict. If you are in a family, this leads to more partnership with your spouse and with your children. So, what I encourage you to do is to take these tools. And if you are in an organization and you know that you're having communication challenges amongst your leaders, between your leaders and staff, and it's starting to eat at the level of trust and safety that your organization experiences, then I invite you to reach out to me and let's have a conversation about how we could potentially work together to improve the overall communication health of your organization. All right. So go to mindremappingacademy.com and um, share this episode, share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member, because these are the conversations that are going to help to shift and change our organizations and our world. Okay, so make sure you subscribe and make sure you share, and so go off and take these tools and practice them. Let me know how it goes, and I will see you on the next episode. But until then,